Hello dear friends. I've always sensed this information, but now it's confirmed by the Telegraph newspaper and the Paris-based International Earth Rotation Service, which is forced to adjust its high-precision atomic clock. This is one more sign that the world is changing. Opinion piece. Earth is spinning faster. Time is passing faster now. This is forcing a high-precision atomic clock to be adjusted. International Earth Rotation Service is in Paris. Chile and China optimize the world's largest radio telescope. Biden orders bombing in Syria against pro-Iranian militias. Leaked emails confirmed United Nations gave name of dissidents to CCP. Europe's first driverless electric bus already on the road in Malaga. Russian Navy keeps a close eye on Spanish minehunter Tagus in the Black Sea. Puerto Rico aims to become new full-fledged US state. NASA plans to explore an asteroid that could collapse the world economy. 80% of workers prefer office to teleworking 3 days a week. Low sperm count threatens humankind's survival. Powerful X-ray reveal unique differences in schizophrenic neurons. Female farmer sentenced to 6 months in jail for giving grain to another farmer. Let's start. The Earth is spinning faster now than at any time in the last half-century, reported the Telegraph. This may explain why time is passing us by more quickly. As that value gets shorter and shorter, albeit in milliseconds, it becomes necessary to periodically adjust the measurement of time with an atomic clock that is highly accurate and doesn't depend on the speed of the Earth's rotation. It may be necessary to interleave a negative second so that the atomic clocks can align correctly with the world as it rotates now. Over the course of 2021, the atomic clocks are expected to accumulate a delay of about 90 milliseconds. The planet is accelerating and a negative leap of a second may soon be necessary for the atomic clocks to correctly align with the spinning world, and it would be the first time that a second has been removed from the world clocks. Variable speed. The Earth's rotation speed varies constantly due to the complex motion of its molten core, oceans and atmosphere, as well as the effect of celestial bodies such as the Moon. Tidal friction and the change in the distance between the Earth and the Moon cause daily variations in the rotational speed of the planet on its axis, and even snow that accumulates on mountains and melts in the summer can change the rotation. July 19, 2020 was recorded as the shortest day since records began in the 1960s. After high-precision atomic clocks were developed and the length of a normal day was compared to the fixed stars in the sky. According to the Telegraph, the previous shortest day in 2005 was beaten 28 times in 2020, and 2021 is expected to be the fastest year in history, with the average day passing 0.5 milliseconds faster than usual. While it would take hundreds of years for the difference to become obvious to most people, modern satellite communications and navigation systems rely on time being constant, with the stable position of the sun, moon and stars. The job of scientists and officials at the Paris-based International Earth Rotation Service is to monitor the planet's rotation and inform countries when leap seconds should be added or subtracted 6 months in advance. History. Among the ancient Greeks, several members of the Pythagorean school believed in the rotation of the Earth rather than the apparent diurnal rotation of the heavens. In the 10th century, Man's astronomers accepted that the Earth rotates around its axis. In the year 599, the Indian astronomer Aryabhata wrote that the spherical Earth rotates around its axis daily, and that the apparent motion of the stars is a relative motion caused by the rotation of Earth. The most famous proof of the Earth's rotation is the so-called Foucault pendulum, first constructed by physicist Léon Foucault in 1851, consisting of brass sphere filled with a lead suspended 67 meters from the top of the Pantheon in Paris. Definition: terrestrial rotation is one of the Earth's motions that consists of rotating around its own axis. The Earth rotates from west to east, and do the other planets of the other system, with the exception of Venus, like do the other planets, I mean. Taking the North Poles as a point of view, the Earth rotates counterclockwise. A complete revolution relative to a fixed star lasts 25 hours. The rotation speed of the Earth is 1,670 kilometers per hour at the equator, decreasing as we approach to the poles, where the value is almost zero. Over millions of years, the rotation has been slowed down significantly by gravitational interactions with the Moon. However, some large events such as the 2004 Indian Ocean earthquake or tsunami have accelerated the rotation. The Earth's rotational motion produces a three-dimensional effect on bodies moving on the surface, especially liquids, such as oceans, seas, rivers, and lakes, and gaseous effects in the atmosphere, such as wind at the surface. They also exert this effect on some solid bodies, such as ocean, river, lake, or land ice. This is an inertial effect, both in the atmosphere and the hydrosphere. For example, in continental and marine waters. Examples: planetary winds, North Equatorial current, Antarctic syncopolar current, etc. Shape of the Earth. I was taught as a child that the Earth is not a perfect sphere, but is flattened at the poles, just the shape of a toroidal magnetic field, like a donut or an apple, which seems to be universal on all planets and throughout creation. I do not believe that the Earth is the center of the universe, not that it is flat, because those theories come from the Middle Ages and seem childish to me. In fact, the believers in those theories were persecuted and burned. Many dissidents like Galileo or Giordano Bruno. So neither for you nor for me, neither flat nor spherical, but toroidal. A toroid is a surface of revolution generated by a closed and flat curve that rotates around a fixed straight line on its plane and exterior to it. In geometry, the toroid is the surface of revolution generated by a polygon or a simple closed plane curve that rotates around an axis of rotation with which it doesn't intersect. Since the Earth is flattened at the poles and bulging at the equator, the geometric figure used in geodesy that most closely approximates the shape of the Earth is an oblate spheroid. An oblate ellipsoid is a spheroid of the revolution obtained by rotating an ellipse around its shortest axis. Spheroid that represents the shape of the Earth or another celestial body is called a reference ellipsoid. Equatorial bulge. Equatorial bulging and polar flattening. The Earth's rotation creates a centrifugal force that has its maximum value at the equator, resulting in the equatorial bulging of our planet. This centrifugal force was giving rise to the equatorial bulge of the entire planet, including the solid part, and also to the polar flattening. This polar flattening and the equatorial bulge regulate, in both cases, the oceanic dynamics of the sea currents and the dynamics of the atmosphere. This means that the equatorial bulge of the marine waters and the atmosphere is added to the bulge of the solid part of the Earth. In turn, the manifestation of this bulging have been felt in a lower density of moving bodies along the equator and over much of the intertropical zone, which in turn affects the inertial direction of all moving bodies. Science news. NASA plans to explore an asteroid that could collapse the world economy. The mission to study the asteroid Syzygy-16, whose value is thousands of times greater than the world economy, has entered the last phase of operations. According to specialists, the spacecraft and onboard equipment have yet to be assembled and subjected to a final test. The first driverless electric bus in Europe is already circulating in Malaga, Spain. During these days, the first driverless electric bus in Europe can be seen on the streets of Malaga. It's a pilot project that will run until March 15. At the moment, it circulates supervised by a professional. Its non-driver has been behind the wheel for 35 years. Now he hardly touches it. Politics. Biden orders bombing Syria against pro-Iranian militias. The U.S. Defense Department said Thursday it carried out an airstrike in eastern Syria against Iranian-backed militia targets in response to a series of recent actions against U.S. facilities in Iraq. Mysterious ghost plane discovered at U.S. base in Somalia hints at ongoing clandestine operations. Washington has claimed to have fully withdrawn its military forces from Somalia, but recent images of the type of heavily modified private passenger aircraft used by civilian contractors point to ongoing operation of a more secretive nature in the East African nation. Amnesty report chronicles massacre in Ethiopia's Tigray region. Eritrean soldiers systematically killed several hundred people, mostly men, in a massacre in late November in the Ethiopian town of Aksum, Amnesty International said in a report released Friday. The Russian Navy closely follows the Spanish minehunter Tagus in the Black Sea. The Russian fleet follows the movements of the Spanish Navy minehunter Tagus, which entered the waters of the Black Sea, the National Defense Control Center reported. The Russian Black Sea Fleet is closely following the Tagus and the Greek minesweeper Evropi, according to the Interfax news agency. Puerto Rico, a new U.S. state. There are territories that are under the jurisdiction of the government in Washington, but lack representation in Congress. However, new seats could change the configuration of power. Perhaps the most emblematic example of a territory that has long aspired to U.S. statehood is Puerto Rico. Currently, this Caribbean island has Commonwealth status. In other words, it is an incorporated territory that at the same time is under the jurisdiction of the US government. Puerto Ricans do not have the right to vote in the US presidential elections, nor do they have their own representations in the US Congress. Puerto Ricans do not seem to be happy with the current status of their island. The territory belongs to the United States, but is not officially part of it. The people of Puerto Rico voted in a referendum in June 2017 and opted for the future of the island as full-fledged state within the US. Excuse me. Almonds, the economic mainstay of families in the Bolivian Amazon. Between December and March, thousands of indigenous peasants' hands are dedicated to harvesting tons of this nut, 98 of which is exported to Europe and the United States. It's estimated that Bolivia generates between 50 and 70% of this world production. China. Leaked emails confirm UN gave names of dissidents to CCP. Leaked emails show that, contrary to United Nations denial, UN human rights officials did in fact give the names of Chinese dissidents to the communist regime of Beijing, before those activists testified in Geneva against Chinese Communist Party abuses. In other words, those responsible for protecting human rights became whistleblowers of dissidents to the Chinese communists. Unbelievable. Xi Jinping declares victory over extreme poverty in China. The President Xi Jinping is pleased that his country has freed 770 million people in rural areas for extreme poverty, rural. Since the late 70s. China's President Xi Jinping highlighted his country's achievement this February 25th and stressed that the Chinese authorities achieved completely victory over absolute poverty, a progress he called a miracle that will go down in history, reports Xinhua news agency. But he didn't speak of the lack of freedom in China. No Korean man who swam for about 6 hours in a wetsuit and flippers to flee to South Korea is filmed. A video was released this week showing a North Korean man fleeing into the neighboring country. The video shows him passing near a road sign while crossing the demilitarized zone of the inter-Korean border. Last February 16, the defector swam in a wetsuit and flippers, crawled through a tunnel and accessed the heavily guarded border zone for a few hours before he was apprehended. All communists are advised to emigrate to the workers' paradise of North Korea. Economy. 80% of workers prefer the office to teleworking, at least 3 days a week. 80% of voters want the office to be their main place of work at least 3 days a week when the current health crisis is over, according to a study in Spain. Banks wait for work from home. As the final industry prepares for life after the healthcare crisis, commercial banks are moving quickly to leverage work from home to cut costs, while investment banks are eager to bring traders and advisors back to the office. GameStop shares saw again gaining 100% value. January's GameStop whirling caused one of the biggest disruptions on Wall Street since the market meltdown that preceded the financial crisis. GameStop shares jumped nearly 104% on Wednesday and more than 60% in the pre-market trading on Thursday. Talgo, a railway company, Spanish company, loses 17.4 million in 2020, compared to a positive result of 38.4 million in the previous year, as a result of the disruptions caused by the healthcare crisis. Telefónica earns 38.5% more in 2020. The Spanish telecommunications company Telefónica earned 38.5% more in 2020, up to 582 billion euros, in a year marked by the healthcare crisis. The 2020 figures compared with those of 2019, when the operator recorded a year of sharp falls in its profit, which plummeted 65.7% due to the company's redundancy plan in the midst of a transformation process. Technology. Microsoft, Intel, and Adobe team up to censor. A cohort of the world's most powerful technology corporations is working on a project aimed at forever silencing opposing voices on the internet. Microsoft, Intel, and BBC, and Adobe, along with the lesser-known TrueEpic and ARM, have joined forces to develop new censorship tools, the likes of which the world has never seen. These corporations forget Article 19 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, in quotes. Everyone has the right to freedom of opinion and expression. This right includes freedom to hold opinions without interference and to seek, receive, and impart information and ideas throughout any media and regardless of frontiers. Slaves of artificial intelligence. The universe of science fiction presents us with Lapses, the first feature film by American Noah Hutton, which left us amazed at how we become slaves of artificial intelligence in a dehumanized world where the so-called collaborative economy ends up putting us in a loop of precarious jobs. Agriculture. A farmer sentenced to 6 months in prison for setting grain to another farmer to sow wheat. A farmer has been sentenced to 6 months in prison in a final judgment for seeding grain to another farmer to sow a variety of soft wheat. The sentence, handed down by the Criminal Court No. 1 of Avila, Spain, considers it proven that the convicted transferred a variety of the soft wheat, verdum, which is a crime against industrial property. A shrub helps to clean the pollution of roads. It is a type of shrub with the scientific name of Cotonestar franchetti, shrub or bush, with the best air purifier known, which is the best air purifier known. The problem is that this bush is not a native species of Europe, but of southwest China. It has been used here as an ornamental plant for quite some time, and there are already known cases of naturalization of the species, which can lead to problems. Ecology. Dr. Vanada Shiva criticized Bill Gates, Mark Zuckerberg, and Monsanto. Physicist, environmental activist, and renowned author Dr. Vanada Shiva has denounced an aggressive push towards false solutions of farms managed through artificial intelligence and predictive algorithms, precision agriculture, fake foods such as lab-grown meat, synthetically produced oils, artificial breast milk, pollinator robots, GMO farms, and digital sequencing of genetic information of agrodiversity. Over the past 30 years, Navdanya's research on biodiversity-based agroecological agriculture has demonstrated how agroecology can increase nutrition and health as well as farmers' incomes, while rejuvenating soil, water, and biodiversity and improving climate resilience. She is a pioneer in the seed freedom and conservation movement, which began in response to the crisis of agriculture, biodiversity erosion, and the introduction of GMOs and seed patents through intellectual property rights. His books and articles document the seed takeover and the immoral and unethical actions of large corporations, such as Monsanto in India and around the world, when organic farming has proven to be the best way to feed the world. Why do giant corporations insist on taking over and doing things their way? Why do they have so much influence over government policy? Health. Low sperm count threatens human survival. Declining sperm counts in the male population and changes in sexual development threaten the survival of humankind, warns a leading epidemiologist. Powerful X-rays reveal unique differences in neurons of schizophrenics. A group of scientists discovered evidence that the neurons of patients with schizophrenia may have unique differences in thickness and curvature. This finding, a product of observing the characteristics of brain cells on a nanometer scale, could even explain some symptoms of this disease. Aggressive negotiations. Several American countries have experienced extremely aggressive negotiation tactics by the U.S. pharmaceutical giant Pfizer, which has demanded total immunity from any civil claims and the state assets of a guarantee. Ethical doubts about the inoculation certificate. The interest among the heads of state and government of Europe to have an inoculation certificate in summer increased this Thursday during the summit that they held telematically, although doubts still persist about the exact use that should be given to the document in order not to create privileges when traveling. The leader of a satanic sect that murdered several young people in Ecuador was dismembered. He was condemned for hitting a sect called Uñas Negras, Black Nails, that carried out several murders and rituals in which he dismembered his victims. Fidel Andrés Palomino Alaus, alias Fito, had been in Turi prison, Cuenca, for 9 years. Fito died in prison by the same method he used years earlier to kill several young men in 2012. Love and light. I remember the message of a Pleiadian, in quotes. You can't just be love and light because they end up eating you. Be kind and loving to all, but carry a sharp sword. I also remember the message of the great and noble Spanish lawyer José Ortega that I saw just today. In quotes, I am a good person, kind, loving, and affectionate, but when I see an injustice, my fangs get sharpened, and I get a really bad temper, and I am a city with me. This intolerance to injustice and the generous defense of the weak against the abuses of the strong is very typical of the Spanish people, as evidenced in Don Quixote de la Mancha. And this nobility is something that honors all of us who have Iberian genetics, including our brothers in America. But we must control the indignation by reasoning, and not be dragged by madness as Don Quixote. Be innocent as doves, but cunning as serpents, as the Master said, to defend ourselves in this dark world, where the big fish eat the small fish, without explanation. But in the end, this dark world will be illuminated despite of all efforts of darkness to prevent it. Someone spoke to me about eliminating borders between countries. That would be done when humankind has ascended, because if it were done right now, the powerful countries would eat at the weak ones directly, just as the fish do now, which is already happening, but not so blatantly. And that's all for today. Thanks a lot, dear friends.